My husband's entire family wore white to our wedding to prove I'd never be good enough for their son, so I made sure they turned into laughingstocks. The day I met Brian's mother, Rita, she looked me up and down and said I seem nice for a temporary girlfriend. That should have been my warning. Brian and I met at a veterinary conference in Denver. He was presenting on equine surgery. I was there for my small animal practice. We bonded over terrible conference coffee and our shared obsession with emergency medicine. 6 months later, he proposed at the same conference, right where we'd first met. His family's reaction was immediate and vicious. Rita called Brian, crying, saying he was throwing his life away. His father, Richard, sent a formal email listing all the women from their country club who would have been better choices. His sister Sophia started a group chat with the extended family called Brian's Mistake, where they shared articles about divorce rates. They didn't know Brian had seen it when he borrowed Sophia's phone. For 2 years, I tried everything. I brought Rita her favorite flowers on every visit. I helped Richard with his classic car restoration research. I attended Sophia's boring charity luncheons, where her friends whispered about me being a gold digger, even though I made more money than Brian. Nothing worked. They wanted their son to marry Victoria, the daughter of their best friends who'd been waiting for Brian to notice her since high school. Victoria, who still called him twice a week. Victoria, whose parents owned half the commercial real estate in town. I stopped trying after Rita's Thanksgiving incident. She'd invited Victoria to dinner without telling us, seated her next to Brian, and spent the entire meal talking about their shared memories while I sat there like furniture. Brian finally told them that if they couldn't respect me, they wouldn't be part of our lives. They backed off, but only superficially. The wedding planning revealed their true strategy. Rita insisted on being involved, then criticized every choice. The venue was too rustic. The flowers were too simple. The caterer wasn't prestigious enough. She offered to pay for upgrades, but only if she could make the decisions. We declined and paid for everything ourselves. 3 days before the wedding, Sophia called Brian, panicking. She'd seen our cousin posting about her dress and realized she'd bought the same one I'd described as similar to mine. Could she still wear it? Brian told her absolutely not. Buy something else. She agreed, sounded apologetic even. The morning of our wedding, I was getting ready with my bridesmaids when the photographer knocked. He needed to discuss something urgent. Brian's family had arrived for pre-ceremony photos, and there was a situation. Every single one of them was wearing white. Rita was in a white beaded gown that looked like a mother of the bride dress because it was one. Richard is in a white suit. Sophia is in a white cocktail dress. Brian's grandmother, aunts, uncles, and cousins, all in white. 23 people dressed like they were attending their own weddings. The photographer didn't know what to do. My maid of honor, Julia, started cursing. My mother went silent, which was worse than yelling. I asked the photographer to give us a moment and sat down to think. They wanted to ruin my wedding. They wanted the photos to look ridiculous, for everyone to talk about how his family upstaged me, for the day to be about their protest instead of our marriage. But then I remembered something. Julia's sister managed a Halloween store that stayed open year-round for theater productions. It was 40 minutes away. I called her. Did she have costume accessories in bulk? Specifically, did she have those cheap promotional t-shirts from last Halloween's zombie run? The bright red ones with fake blood spatters that said Survivor in huge letters? She had boxes of them. Julia and 2 bridesmaids drove there while I continued getting ready. They came back with 30 shirts and a bag of accessories. I had the wedding coordinator call a quick meeting with Brian's family in the garden, away from other guests. I walked out in my wedding dress, carrying the box of shirts. Rita started to speak, probably to make some excuse, but I cut her off. You have 2 choices, I said. Put these on over your clothes right now, or leave. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Sophia laughed, said I was being ridiculous, that I couldn't force them to ruin their outfits. Richard said I had no right to make demands. Rita called me a controlling bitch who'd finally shown my true colors. That's when Brian appeared. He'd been waiting inside, letting me handle it my way first. He looked at his family, all dressed in white, and said 5 words. Put them on, or go. Their jaws dropped. I raised my hand to stop Rita before she can speak, cutting off whatever excuse about family tradition or coordinated photos she's planning to spin. The garden feels too quiet with 23 people in white staring at me holding this box of bright red shirts. I realize this exact moment will define whether Brian and I spend our marriage fighting his family's ambushes or living by our own rules. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. They're all waiting to see if I'll back down. If the nice veterinarian who brought flowers and attended charity luncheons will fold under pressure like she always has before. But I'm done folding. Brian's grandmother breaks the silence by reaching for a shirt from the box. She pulls it out and holds it up, examining the fake blood splatters and survivor text. She looks at Rita, then at me, then back at the shirt. Her voice comes out steady and practical when she says she's too old for this nonsense and wants to see her grandson get married today. She pulls the red shirt over her pale blue dress without waiting for permission or approval. Her practical surrender cracks the united front immediately. 2 of Brian's younger cousins step forward reluctantly and grab shirts from the box. Their faces show more embarrassment than defiance now that an elder chose compliance over protest. One cousin catches my eye and mouths sorry before pulling his shirt on. The other keeps his head down like he's ashamed to be part of this situation at all. Richard's face goes red with anger. He declares this is humiliating and refuses to be dictated to by someone who's been in the family for 5 minutes. His voice shakes with wounded pride more than righteous anger. Rita stands frozen beside him, and I watch her eyes move from me to Brian, to the arriving guests visible through the garden gate. She's calculating whether doubling down or backing down will cost her more social capital with the wedding guests already finding their seats. Her mouth opens and closes twice without words coming out. Sophia pulls out her phone and aims it at the shirts, probably planning to document this as evidence of my controlling behavior for her social media followers. Brian steps forward before she can take the photo. He tells her quietly that anyone who posts about this before we approve the narrative will be removed from all wedding photos and asked to leave. His voice stays calm but firm. The threat of social exclusion makes Sophia lower her phone with a scowl that tells me she understands consequences now. Being erased from the public record of the day matters more to her than documenting her protest. Julia appears at my side with 2 other bridesmaids backing her up. We start handing shirts directly to family members while maintaining steady eye contact that says we're not negotiating or explaining anymore. The physical act of pressing fabric into their hands forces a decision point. I watch the family's unity crumble as individual choices replace group defiance. Some pull shirts on immediately without meeting my eyes. Others clutch the shirts while looking to Rita for guidance she's not providing because she's still frozen in her own calculation. Brian's aunt takes her shirt and whispers, "Thank you," which surprises me until I realize she's thanking me for not making them leave. His uncle mutters something about this being the most ridiculous wedding he's ever attended, but he yanks the shirt over his white button-down anyway. His wife follows with a tight expression that says she's mad, but not enough to miss her nephew's wedding. I notice the shirt covers most of the white underneath. The fake blood splatters actually look decent against the garden greenery. Cameron, the photographer, can work with this if we're strategic about angles and positioning for the family photos. Rita finally speaks. Her voice shakes with either rage or tears when she says we're making a mockery of a sacred day. She says she won't forget this humiliation we forced on Brian's family. I meet her eyes and tell her calmly that she made her choice when she coordinated this stunt. We're simply making sure our wedding photos reflect our boundaries rather than her protest. She can wear the shirt or watch from the parking lot. My voice doesn't shake even though my heart pounds against my ribs. Richard grabs Rita's arm and pulls her aside for a whispered argument. I can't hear the words, but I can read their body language perfectly. He's calculating the social cost of leaving versus staying. She's realizing that walking out makes them look worse than wearing a zombie shirt. Their whispered discussion gets more intense. Rita's hands move in sharp gestures. Richard's jaw clenches tight. After 30 seconds, Richard snatches 2 shirts from the box. He thrusts one at Rita with a gesture that screams resentful compliance rather than genuine agreement. I watch Rita pull the red shirt over her expensive white beaded gown. Her hands tremble with fury as she yanks the fabric down. I feel a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness because this could have been avoided if she'd just let me have one day. Just one single day where she didn't try to control or undermine or protest. Sophia is the last holdout now. She stands with her arms crossed and her white cocktail dress gleaming in the sunlight. Brian walks over to her with a shirt in his hands. He says simply that he loves her, but she needs to decide right now whether she's his sister or his adversary. His voice breaks slightly on the last word. Sophia stares at him for a long moment. Her face cycles through anger and hurt, and something that might be shame. She takes the shirt with a dramatic eye roll meant to show she's only complying under duress. As she pulls it on, I notice her hands shake too. She's not as confident in this rebellion as she wants everyone to believe. Poppy, the coordinator, appears with perfect timing. She announces that guests are seated and we're ready to begin. Her professional cheerfulness cuts through the tension like we've just finished normal pre-ceremony photos, rather than a family standoff. She gestures toward the ceremony space with a bright smile that doesn't acknowledge anything unusual just happened. I look at Brian's family all standing there in red survivor shirts over their white clothes. Instead of feeling guilty, I feel clear. They tried to ruin this day, and we turned their sabotage into something we controlled. Brian squeezes my hand and whispers that I'm magnificent. I squeeze back because we're doing this together. That's exactly what marriage should be, even when it's hard. Cameron walks over to me with his camera bag and leans in close so only I can hear him speak. He suggests we skip the family photos before the ceremony and do them after instead, giving everyone time to calm down and look less angry for the pictures. I agree right away because the last thing I want is photos that look like a hostage situation instead of a wedding day. He nods and moves off to adjust his lighting setup while I take one more look at Brian's family standing there in their red shirts. The fake blood splatters catch the sunlight, the white clothes peek out from underneath. They tried to sabotage this day, and we turned it into something we controlled. Brian squeezes my hand and leans close to whisper that I'm magnificent. I squeeze back because we're handling this together. That's what marriage means even when it's hard. Poppy appears and starts directing Brian's family toward their seats with the same cheerful efficiency she's shown all morning. Her voice stays bright and professional like nothing unusual just happened. I watch Rita walk stiffly toward the ceremony space with her arms crossed over the red fabric. Richard follows behind her with his jaw set tight. Sophia trails after them while typing something on her phone, probably already crafting her social media version of events. I turn away and head back to the getting ready room where Julia waits with my bouquet. Julia helps me check my dress and touch up my makeup while my hands stay steadier than I expected. I just face down my new in-laws in what might be the most confrontational moment of my life. My fingers don't shake when I smooth down the fabric of my dress. My reflection in the mirror shows someone who looks calm and ready. My mom appears in the doorway and catches my eye in the mirror. She gives me a small nod without saying anything. Her expression communicates pride in how I handled the situation. That matters more than I realized it would. Her quiet approval has always meant I'm on the right track. I move to the entrance area and wait behind the closed doors while the coordinator cues up my entrance music. I can hear the low murmur of guests on the other side. Their voices carry speculation about the red shirts in the family section. I imagine people leaning over to whisper questions to each other. Someone probably asking what happened. Someone else making guesses. I've already decided I don't care what story people tell themselves as long as Brian and I know the truth. The music starts with the opening notes of the song we chose. My father appears at my side and offers his arm. I take it and we step into view when the doors open. Brian waits at the altar and his face lights up when he sees me. His expression shows pure love and relief that makes everything else fade into background noise. I focus on him while my father and I walk down the aisle. Some guests smile at the survivor shirts like they're in on a joke. A few look confused with their eyebrows raised. Most people focus on me and Brian, which is exactly how it should be. Rita sits in the front row with her arms crossed over her red shirt. Her face looks like a mask of barely controlled anger. Richard beside her looks more resigned than hostile. His shoulders slump slightly and his jaw isn't as tight as it was in the garden. I file that away as potentially significant for future interactions. The officiant greets us with warmth in his voice when we reach the altar. He starts the ceremony with gentle humor that helps cut through the remaining tension in the air. When he makes a joke about marriage being about surviving together through challenges, a few guests laugh out loud. I see Brian's grandmother smile from her seat in the second row. I focus on Brian's face and the words we're about to say to each other. The family drama becomes just context rather than the main event. This moment is about us choosing each other despite everything his family tried to do. We reach our personal vows and Brian's voice stays steady when he promises to always have my back even when it's hard. I know he's talking about more than just today. He's promising that his family's approval will never matter more than my dignity. I promise him that I'll never ask him to choose between me and them, but I will always expect him to choose our marriage first. His eyes get a little wet when I say those words. He understands I'm releasing him from the guilt they've tried to use as a weapon. We're building something new together that doesn't require their permission. During the ring exchange, I catch Sophia leaning over to whisper something to her cousin in the third row. I watch the cousin's expression shift from curious to disapproving. Sophia's trying to control the narrative even now during the ceremony. I choose not to let it distract me because Sophia's whisper campaign is her problem, not mine. I've learned that you can't stop people from talking. You can only control whether you give them ammunition. I slide the ring onto Brian's finger and he slides mine on with hands that don't shake. The officiant pronounces us married and Brian kisses me with enthusiasm that makes the guests cheer and clap. For a moment, the red shirts and family tension disappear into pure celebration. We're just two people who love each other starting our marriage. As we walk back down the aisle together, I notice that some of Brian's relatives are smiling genuinely now. Maybe they've decided to let go of the protest and just enjoy the party. Others still look stiff and angry with tight lips and crossed arms. That's fine. We gave them a choice and they made it. In the cocktail hour space, guests immediately cluster around us with congratulations and warm hugs. Several make jokes about the survivor shirts that feel supportive rather than mocking. Like they understand something happened, but they're on our side. An older couple from Brian's equine practice finds us near the bar. They tell us quietly that they think we handled a difficult situation with grace. Their words confirm that some witnesses saw through the family's stunt to recognize our boundary setting. We thank them and move on to greet more guests, while I feel the weight of the morning start to lift off my shoulders. My mom finds me near the appetizer table and pulls me into a hug without saying a word. Her arms wrap tight around me and she holds on for several extra seconds. The squeeze tells me everything she's thinking about how I handled the garden confrontation. When she finally pulls back, she leans close to my ear and whispers that my dad was ready to physically escort the entire family out if they refuse the shirts. I laugh because my dad is the most gentle person I know. He's a retired librarian who cries at commercials, but apparently he draws a hard line at people trying to ruin his daughter's wedding day. Mom squeezes my hand once more and then melts back into the crowd of guests. Cameron finds Brian and me a few minutes later near the bar. He wants to talk about photo strategy before we start the formal family shots. He explains that he can use angles and cropping to minimize the red shirts while still capturing real moments with everyone. Or we can lean into it and make the shirts part of the story the photos tell. We think about it for a minute while sipping water. Brian and I agree on a middle path without needing much discussion. Some traditional family shots that downplay the shirts through careful positioning. And a few honest ones that show what actually happened without making it the only thing people see. We want photos that tell the truth about our day, not pretty lies that pretend everything was perfect. Cameron nods and says he can work with that approach. He's already thinking about lighting and backgrounds that will help. The reception coordinator gathers everyone for our grand entrance into the dining space. The DJ has our music queued up and ready. When he announces us as husband and wife, he adds a playful line about the bride and groom and their survivor family. The guests laugh in a way that feels warm and supportive rather than mean. They're laughing with us, not at us. I glance toward where Brian's family sits at their assigned table. Rita's jaw goes tight when she hears the joke. Her lips press into a thin line. But Richard surprises me by cracking a small smile. It's brief and he catches himself quickly. But I see it. Maybe he has more ability to laugh at himself than his wife does. That small moment makes me file Richard away as potentially different from Rita in how he might handle things going forward. Julia stands up with the microphone for her maid of honor toast. She looks beautiful and confident in her bridesmaid dress. She talks about my strength and how I handle hard situations with both grace and smart strategy. She never names the specific drama that happened this morning, but everyone who knows what went down understands she's talking about more than just general life problems. She praises how I know my own worth and won't accept less than respect. Then she ends by saying Brian is lucky to have found a partner like that. The applause that follows is loud and goes on for a while, long enough that I know the guests support us and our boundary setting. Several people at nearby tables are nodding while they clap. An older woman I recognize from Brian's practice even raises her glass extra high. Midway through dinner, I'm cutting into my salmon when Poppy appears at our table. She leans down between Brian and me with an apologetic expression. Richard just approached her asking if he could say a few words to the guests, probably planning some speech that reframes the shirt incident, or offers a public explanation that makes his family look better than they actually behaved. Poppy came to check with us first instead of just handing him the microphone. I appreciate her protocol awareness. Brian and I look at each other and the answer is immediate and mutual. We both shake our heads. This is our wedding reception, not Richard's redemption opportunity. He can process his feelings about what happened on his own time. We're not giving him a platform tonight to control the narrative. Poppy nods and heads back to where Richard is waiting near the DJ booth. I watch her speak to him briefly. His face shows disappointment, but he doesn't argue with her. Julia slides into the empty seat next to me a few minutes later. She's holding her phone with a weird expression. Sophia just posted a selfie to social media. Julia turns the screen so I can see it. Sophia's wearing the red survivor shirt in the photo. Her caption says something about family traditions taking unexpected turns. The post is clearly meant to mock the whole situation, but she's written it with enough vague language that she can claim she meant something else if anyone calls her out. I feel a flash of anger in my chest. My first instinct is to respond or comment or do something. But Brian puts his hand on my arm. He suggests we wait and see how this plays out instead of reacting right away. Sometimes people expose themselves better when you let them keep talking. Their own behavior becomes the evidence. I take a breath and hand Julia's phone back. She screenshots the post anyway for our records. After dinner, we find Cameron and ask him to gather Brian's family for one specific group photo. We want everyone clearly visible wearing the red survivor shirts. No strategic angles or cropping for this one. Cameron understands immediately what we're asking for. He gets the whole family arranged in good lighting. All 23 of them standing together in their bright red shirts over white clothes. We join them for the photo and everyone smiles for the camera. Rita's smile doesn't reach her eyes. Sophia's looks forced and tight. But several of the cousins and aunts seem more relaxed now. The photo feels powerful to me when Cameron shows us the preview on his camera screen. Not because it's pretty or Pinterest-worthy, but because it's proof. Documentation of what happened if anyone tries to rewrite history later. It shows we set a boundary and enforced it. That matters more to me than having perfect wedding photos. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses bumps into me near our table. The collision isn't hard, but it's enough. Champagne splashes down the front of my white dress. The liquid spreads into a growing stain across the bodice and skirt. Normally this would feel like a disaster, the kind of thing that ruins a bride's whole day. But tonight it just feels like one more thing on a long list. I actually laugh while I grab a napkin and start dabbing at the wet fabric. Brian helps me blot the stain with his own napkin. The waiter is apologizing over and over. I tell him it's fine and I mean it. After standing in a garden this morning telling my new in-laws to put on zombie shirts or leave, a stained dress barely registers as a problem. My whole sense of what counts as a crisis has shifted. The champagne will dry. The dress can be cleaned. We're still married and that's what matters. The DJ announces our first dance as a married couple. Brian and I walk onto the dance floor while our song starts playing. He pulls me close and we sway together. His arms feel solid and safe around me. We don't need to say anything out loud. We both understand without words that we're done explaining or managing his family's feelings tonight. We did what we needed to do. Now we're just going to enjoy being married. Brian leans his head down close to mine. He tells me he's never been more sure of his choice to marry me than when I stood in that garden holding a box of red shirts. When I refused to be steamrolled by his family's stunt. I tell him that his backing me up meant everything. That him saying those 5 words to his family proved we're a team. We keep dancing while other couples join us on the floor. The moment feels private even though we're surrounded by guests. Near the end of the reception, Rita approaches me while I'm saying goodbye to some departing guests. She's holding a white envelope in her hand. Her expression is hard to read. She says she wants to give us a check to help with proper wedding photos since today's didn't turn out as planned. Her tone makes it completely clear what she's really doing. She's trying to buy control of the narrative, trying to fund a do-over that erases what actually happened. I take the envelope from her hand. Then I hand it right back without opening it. I keep my voice gentle but very firm. Our photos will be exactly what we want them to be. We don't need financial help to remember our wedding day. Her offer is declined. Rita's face flushes red. She opens her mouth like she's going to argue, but then she closes it again and walks away. I watch her return to Richard at their table. She's speaking to him in sharp, whispered tones. He's nodding, but his shoulders are slumped. I turn back to thanking guests for coming. The reception winds down over the next hour with dancing and final goodbyes. Brian and I leave through a tunnel of sparklers held by our friends. The day is finally over. Earlier during the reception, before we left through those sparklers, a few of Brian's relatives had pulled us aside one by one to offer what felt like genuine apologies. His cousin Mark found me near the dessert table and said he thought the shirt solution was brilliant problem-solving. His wife Sarah touched my arm and added that she was sorry we were put in that position, and her eyes looked sincere instead of just polite. I made mental notes about who these people were because they were showing me something important. They could separate themselves from Rita's agenda. They could think for themselves instead of just following along with the family drama. An older uncle I'd only met twice before shook Brian's hand and told him quietly that the white clothing stunt was embarrassing for everyone. Brian's face showed relief when he heard that, like he'd been worried his entire family had turned against us. 3 other relatives made similar quiet comments throughout the evening. They didn't make a big show of it or announce their support publicly, but they let us know privately that they understood what had happened and didn't approve of it. After the last guests finally leave and we're alone with our wedding party in a small room off the main hall, Julia opens a bottle of champagne that she'd hidden away for this moment. My bridesmaids and Brian's groomsmen gather around as we all collapse into chairs, still wearing our wedding clothes but with shoes kicked off and ties loosened. Julia pours champagne into plastic cups and we start debriefing the entire day. Someone brings up seeing all that white in the pre-ceremony photos, and I admit I felt actual fear in that moment. Not just anger or frustration, but real fear that they'd succeeded in ruining everything we'd planned. My maid of honor describes the satisfaction of watching Rita's face when she had to pull that red shirt over her expensive dress. One of the groomsmen laughs and says he's never seen anything like it at a wedding before. But then the laughter fades and I hear myself saying what I've been thinking all evening. I'm worried about the long-term damage to Brian's family relationships. I'm worried we just made everything worse instead of better. My bridesmaids rush to reassure me that I handled it perfectly, that I had no choice, that his family forced this situation. But I can see in Brian's face that he's thinking the same thing I am. What happens now? What does tomorrow look like? Julia squeezes my hand and tells me that standing up for ourselves was the right thing, even if it's messy. We finish the champagne and eventually head to our hotel room. both of us too tired to think about consequences anymore. The morning after the wedding, I wake up in the hotel bed next to Brian and immediately check my phone. 7 voicemails from Richard. I put the phone on speaker and listen to them while Brian orders coffee from room service. The first message is calm, asking us to call him when we get a chance. The second one is less calm, mentioning optics and how people are talking. By the third message, his voice is tight with stress as he talks about fixing the narrative before it gets out of hand. The fourth message suggests we need to issue some kind of joint statement about the shirt incident. The fifth one brings up specific people from the country club who are asking questions. The sixth message is almost frantic, talking about damage control and family reputation. The seventh message, left at 2 in the morning, is just Richard saying we need to talk as soon as possible. I feel my jaw clench with each message. My hands grip the phone tighter. Brian watches my face and asks if I want him to call his dad back right now. I tell him no, not yet. Responding while I'm this angry would just make things worse. We need to think about what we want to say instead of just reacting. The coffee arrives and we drink it in bed, both of us staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out our next move. 2 days later, back at our house, a delivery arrives. The box is wrapped in expensive paper with a card attached. I open the card first and see Victoria's handwriting. The message says, "Wishing you both happiness," in neat cursive letters. Brian and I stare at the card for a long moment. Is this sincere? Is it passive-aggressive? Is she trying to make peace, or is this another manipulation? The handwriting gives no clues. It could be read either way depending on what we want to see in it. Brian opens the box to find a set of nice wine glasses, the kind you'd register for at an expensive store. Nothing weird or insulting about the gift itself. We stand in our kitchen looking at these wine glasses and trying to decode Victoria's motives. Finally, Brian says we should just accept it at face value. Send a polite thank you note and move on. But we both agree to stay cautious about her. One nice gift doesn't erase 2 years of her calling him twice a week and showing up at family dinners. We put the wine glasses in the cabinet and I write a brief thank you card that says nothing personal. That same afternoon, Julia texts me 3 screenshots. She says she was searching Sophia's name on social media and found something I need to see. The screenshots show a group chat from 3 weeks before our wedding. Rita created it and named it Family Photos Coordination. The messages lay out the entire white clothing plan in detail. Rita told everyone to wear white and made it sound like a unified family statement. She even suggested specific dress codes for different family members. Formal white for parents and grandparents. Cocktail white for the younger generation. She wrote that this would show Brian what real family loyalty looks like. Sophia responded with enthusiasm and offered to make sure all the cousins participated. Someone asked if this was a good idea, and Rita shut down the objection immediately. The screenshots prove this wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't accidental. It was a calculated campaign planned weeks in advance. Seeing the evidence in writing makes my anger sharpen into something clearer. This is exactly what we're dealing with. Rita doesn't just dislike me. She actively works to undermine us and gets other family members to join in. I forward the screenshots to Brian without adding any comment. He calls me from his office 10 minutes later and his voice sounds hollow. He'd hoped maybe it was a misunderstanding or a last-minute decision. But no. His mother planned this for weeks. Brian comes home that evening and goes straight to his laptop. He sits at our kitchen table and starts drafting an email to his parents and sister. I watch him type, delete, type again. His hands shake slightly as he works. After an hour, he shows me the draft. The email establishes new communication boundaries in clear language. All future contact will be through email only, so there's a written record. No surprise visits to our house. No social media commentary about our relationship. Violations will result in a timeout period with no contact. The email lists specific examples of unacceptable behavior. It explains that we're not cutting them off, but we are protecting our marriage. Brian's words are firm and clear even though I can see this is costing him emotionally. He asks if I think it's too harsh. I tell him I'm proud of him for protecting our marriage even when it's hard. He takes a deep breath and hits send before he can second-guess himself. We both stare at the laptop screen for a minute after the email goes through, knowing there's no taking it back now. The next morning, we pack bags for a short trip. We decided we need to get away from all of this for a few days. We book a bed and breakfast 2 hours away in a small town neither of us has visited before. The place has no cell service and limited Wi-Fi. When we arrive, the owner shows us to a room with big windows looking out at trees. We turn off our phones completely. For 3 days, we exist in this bubble where Brian's family drama can't reach us. We sleep late. We take long walks. We eat breakfast in the sunny dining room with other guests, and nobody knows anything about red shirts or white dresses. The forced disconnection feels like permission to just be newlyweds without managing everyone else's reactions. On the 3rd day, Brian says this is what he wants our marriage to feel like. Peaceful. Just us. Not constantly bracing for the next family crisis. I agree, and we talk about how to protect this feeling when we go back to real life. We both know we can't stay in this bubble forever, but we can remember what it feels like. When I return to work at my veterinary clinic the following week, my first appointment is a regular client named Mrs. Ed Patterson who brings her cat in for vaccines. She's chatty as always while I examine the cat. Then she makes a vague reference to hearing there was excitement at my wedding. Her tone is carefully neutral, but I can tell she's fishing for details. Someone in the local gossip network told her something. I keep my response brief and professional. I say it was a memorable day, and we're very happy. Then I redirect the conversation back to her cat's health. I watch her face as she decides whether to push for more details or respect my professional boundary. After a pause, she chooses respect and starts asking questions about the cat's diet instead. I appreciate that she backed off. The rest of the day, several other clients make similar vague comments. Word has definitely spread through town about something happening at our wedding, but nobody asks directly, and I don't offer information. By the end of the day, I feel confident that I can handle these conversations without getting pulled into defending or explaining. That evening, Brian comes home from his equine practice looking frustrated. He tells me he overheard two country club members talking in the parking lot. They were discussing our wedding, and one of them was repeating a rumor that I manipulated the shirt situation to humiliate his family publicly. According to the rumor, I planned the whole thing as a power move. Brian didn't correct them because engaging would just feed the gossip. But I can see the frustration in his face at having his family's narrative spread without challenge. We sit on our couch and talk about how sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as who tells the story first. Rita and Sophia are telling their version to anyone who will listen. We're staying quiet and private. Their version is spreading faster because it's more dramatic. But Brian points out that the people who matter, the people we actually care about, know the truth. The country club gossips don't affect our daily lives. Let them talk. We're not going to waste energy trying to control a narrative we can't control anyway. Later that week, I spend an evening researching couples therapists on my laptop. I search for terms like family boundary issues and hostile in-law relationships. Most of the websites are generic and unhelpful. Then I find Miriam Crow's page. Her bio specifically mentions helping couples navigate difficult family dynamics and establish healthy boundaries with relatives who don't respect the marriage. She lists experience with family sabotage situations and communication breakdown. Her approach focuses on practical strategies rather than just talking about feelings. I read through her credentials and client reviews. Everything suggests she understands exactly what we're dealing with. I book an initial session for the following week using her online scheduler. When Brian gets home, I tell him about the appointment. He agrees immediately that we need professional help with this. We can't just keep reacting to each crisis as it happens. We need a broader strategy for managing his family long-term. The appointment confirmation email arrives and I save it to our shared calendar. Having this scheduled makes me feel slightly less overwhelmed. At least we're taking action instead of just surviving. The following week, Brian and I sit in Miriam's office on a comfortable couch that faces her chair. The room smells like lavender and has soft lighting that makes me feel slightly less defensive than I expected. Miriam has a notepad, but she's not writing yet, just looking at us with an expression that seems genuinely interested rather than judgy. She asks us a question that sounds simple but makes me pause. What do we actually want from his family? Not what we wish they were like or what we think we deserve, but what realistic outcome would we accept? Brian and I look at each other and I realize we've never actually said this out loud. I tell her we want basic respect, like not sabotaging our wedding or posting mean things about us online. We want to be able to go to holiday dinners without Rita criticizing everything I do, or Richard trying to control our choices. We're not expecting them to love me or think Brian made a great choice. We just want them to be civil and not actively hostile. Brian adds that he wants his family in his life, but not at the cost of my dignity or our peace. Miriam nods and writes something down. She tells us that accepting limited relationships is actually healthier than trying to win over people who've decided not to like us. She says we've been operating under the idea that if we just find the right approach, his family will come around. But some people won't change no matter what we do, and spending energy trying to fix that is just hurting us. This hits me hard because I realize I've been thinking that way for 2 years. Like there was some magic combination of actions that would make Rita accept me. Hearing Miriam say we can just stop trying feels like permission I didn't know I needed. She pulls out a blank sheet of paper and starts writing scenarios across the top. Rita criticizes my cooking at dinner. Sophia posts a subtle dig about us on social media. Richard calls and demands we attend a family event. For each scenario, she helps us write out exact responses. Simple phrases that don't argue or explain, just set boundaries. When Rita criticizes, we say that doesn't work for us and change the subject. If Sophia posts about us, we don't engage at all. Just screenshot it and add it to our documentation. When Richard makes demands, we tell him we're not discussing this, and we'll let him know our decision later. Miriam makes us practice saying these phrases out loud until they feel natural. At first, I feel confrontational saying that doesn't work for us, like I'm being rude. But Miriam explains that stating a boundary isn't rude, it's just clear. We practice for 20 minutes, taking turns playing his family members while the other person responds with the scripts. By the end, my voice is steadier and the phrases don't feel aggressive anymore, just calm and firm. Brian practices saying we're not discussing this without the guilt that usually makes him over-explain. The session shifts when Miriam asks how we're feeling about all this boundary setting. Brian's face changes and he admits something he's been holding back. He feels guilty about choosing me over keeping peace with his family. Like he's betraying his parents by enforcing these rules. His voice cracks a little when he says it, and I reach for his hand. I tell Miriam I'm scared we'll spend our whole marriage fighting his family instead of building our own life together. That every holiday and birthday will be a battle and we'll never just get to be happy without drama hanging over us. Miriam listens without interrupting, and then she says something that makes sense. These fears are normal and real, but they don't have to control our choices. We can acknowledge that this is hard and sad while still doing what's needed to protect our marriage. The difficulty doesn't mean we're doing the wrong thing. It just means we're doing a hard thing. She reminds us that we've already proven we can set boundaries when we handled the shirt situation. We know how to stand firm together. Now we're just building skills to handle the ongoing relationship instead of crisis moments. 2 days after that session, I'm making dinner when my phone buzzes with an email notification. It's from Richard, and the subject line says, "Can we talk?" My stomach tightens because his last emails were angry lists of everything we did wrong. But when I open it, the tone is different. He's asking if we can meet for lunch to clear the air and discuss how to move forward. He says he understands we're upset and he wants to hear our perspective. The email doesn't demand anything or make excuses. It just asks for a conversation. I show Brian when he gets home from his practice and we stand in the kitchen reading it together. Brian's jaw is tight and I can tell he's trying to figure out if this is real or another manipulation. We talk through the possibilities while our dinner gets cold on the counter. Maybe Richard genuinely wants to repair things. Maybe Rita sent him to gather information. Maybe he's planning to ambush us with demands in person. We go back and forth for an hour, weighing whether meeting with him opens a door to improvement or just gives him another chance to hurt us. Finally, Brian suggests we ask Miriam what she thinks. We email her and she responds within an hour saying we should come in before making a decision. She has an opening the next afternoon. In Miriam's office again, we lay out the situation. Richard wants to meet. We don't know if we should trust it, and we're worried about getting pulled back into their drama right when we're building boundaries. Miriam helps us work through a framework. We'll agree to meet Richard for lunch, but we establish ground rules first. We won't apologize for the shirts. We won't agree to do new wedding photos or any kind of do-over. We won't commit to attending family events without time to discuss it privately between the two of us first. If Richard starts making demands or trying to control the conversation, we'll leave. Miriam has us write down our non-negotiables on paper, so we can reference them if we get overwhelmed during the lunch. She also helps us identify where we can show some flexibility. We can listen to what Richard has to say. We can acknowledge that the situation is hard for everyone. We can express willingness to have a civil relationship if he respects our boundaries. Having this framework written out makes the lunch feel less scary. We're not walking in blind or hoping for the best. We have a plan and we know our limits. Brian emails his father back and agrees to lunch on Saturday at a quiet restaurant across town. Saturday afternoon, Brian leaves for the restaurant and I stay home because we decided Richard might be more honest one-on-one with his son. I try to distract myself with laundry and cleaning, but I keep checking my phone. 2 hours pass before I hear Brian's car in the driveway. When he walks in, he looks tired in a way that's not just physical. His shoulders are tight and his face is pale, but there's something in his eyes that might be hope. He sits down heavily on the couch and I sit next to him. He tells me Richard talked for the first hour almost without stopping. None. He explained that Rita's obsession with the wedding came from fear. She was worried that Brian marrying outside their social circle would hurt the family's standing at the country club. That people would see it as the family going downhill or losing status. Richard said Rita convinced herself that if she could just stop the wedding or make it embarrassing enough, Brian would call it off and everything would go back to normal. Brian says this doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps him understand that Rita's behavior was about status anxiety, rather than personal hatred of me. She wasn't attacking me specifically, she was trying to protect what she saw as the family's reputation. I ask if Richard apologized and Brian says sort of. Richard admitted they handled everything wrong and that the shirt situation was their own fault. He didn't use the word sorry, but he took responsibility for not stopping Rita's plan, even though he knew about it. Brian tells me he laid out clear terms during the second hour. He told his father that any future boundary violations will result in reduced contact. If Rita criticizes me at a family dinner, we'll leave. If Sophia posts about us again, we'll block her. If Richard tries to control our decisions, we'll stop taking his calls. Brian said we're willing to be civil at family events, but we won't perform a relationship we don't have just to make Rita look good to her friends. We won't pretend everything is fine when it's not. Richard listened without arguing, which shocked Brian because he expected pushback. At the end, Richard asked if he could brief Rita on the conversation before she hears a twisted version from Sophia. Brian agreed to that because it seemed reasonable. Richard said he'd send an email summary, so there's a record of what was actually said. The email arrives Sunday morning while we're having coffee. Richard copied both of us on a message to Rita that summarizes their lunch conversation. He writes that the shirt incident was a consequence of the family's coordinated stunt, not unprovoked aggression from us. He states clearly that Brian and I are willing to maintain family relationships, but only if boundaries are respected going forward. The email is more honest than I expected. He doesn't sugarcoat what happened or make excuses for Rita's behavior. He presents the situation factually and acknowledges their role in creating the problem. Rita's response comes 2 hours later. It's only 3 sentences. She says she received the email and understands the terms. Her tone is cold and stiff, but she doesn't argue with Richard's version of events. She doesn't contradict anything he said. It's not an apology and it's not warm, but it's also not defensive or hostile. I show Brian and we both stare at it trying to figure out what it means. Is this acceptance? Is this Rita backing down? We don't know, but it feels like maybe a tiny step toward accountability, even if she can't bring herself to actually apologize. Then Sophia ruins the moment by hitting reply all. Her message mocks the whole idea of boundaries and suggests we're being oversensitive about a little family fun. She writes that everyone needs to lighten up and stop acting like the wedding was some tragedy. Her tone is dismissive and sarcastic, making it clear she hasn't learned anything from the consequences of the shirt situation. She still thinks the whole thing was funny, and that we overreacted. Brian reads her email and his jaw clenches. Instead of responding, he opens his laptop and starts clicking through settings. He removes Sophia from our shared photo album so she can't see our wedding pictures anymore. He mutes her on all his social media accounts so her posts won't show up in his feed. He doesn't announce what he's doing or send her a message explaining. He just quietly enforces consequences without giving her the argument she's clearly trying to start. I watch him work through each platform methodically, and I feel proud of how he's handling this. No drama, no explanation, just action. Monday morning, another email arrives, this time from Rita directly to both of us. The subject line says moving forward. I open it with low expectations and I'm right to be cautious. Rita writes that she's sorry we felt hurt by what was meant as family tradition. She says she never intended to cause problems and she hopes we can all move past this. The email is technically an apology, but it's framed in a way that puts the blame on our interpretation rather than her actions. She's sorry we felt hurt, not sorry she hurt us. She's sorry we saw it as sabotage, not sorry she sabotaged us. It's the kind of non-apology that sounds right if you don't read it carefully. Brian and I sit at the kitchen table and debate whether to accept this or push for a better apology. Part of me wants to email back and explain why her apology doesn't actually take responsibility. But Miriam's voice is in my head reminding us to pick our battles. We talk it through for 30 minutes. Demanding a perfect apology would just create more conflict. We'd have to explain why her apology wasn't good enough, she'd get defensive, and we'd be right back in the middle of family drama. We decide to accept her minimal effort while keeping our boundaries in place. We won't thank her for the apology or pretend it fixed everything. We'll just let it sit there as her attempt, however flawed, to move forward. Her actions going forward will matter more than her words right now anyway. If she actually respects our boundaries at the next family event, that will mean more than any perfectly worded apology email. A week later, a large package arrives from Cameron with a handwritten note taped to the top explaining his editing approach. He writes that he tried to tell an honest story through the photos, using angles, and cropping to minimize the red shirts in some images while including them naturally in others, because he wanted us to have both traditional family photos and a true record of what happened. I carry the heavy album box to the dining table and open it carefully, finding a beautiful leather-bound book with our names embossed on the cover. The first pages show getting ready photos that capture the morning before everything went sideways, and then the ceremony shots begin. Some photos are cropped tight on me and Brian, showing just our faces and the officiant, with no family visible in the background. Other shots pull back to show the full scene, including his family in their red Survivor shirts sitting in the front rows. Cameron included candid moments during the reception, where you can see Brian's grandmother laughing despite her shirt, and Richard talking to my parents with something that almost looks like respect on his face. Looking through the album, I feel satisfied rather than upset because these pictures show the truth. They show us standing together and refusing to let sabotage define our day. They show a couple who set boundaries and enforce them, which matters more to me than pretty photos that hide what we overcame. Brian looks through the album with me and stops at a photo of us cutting the cake, both of us laughing while his family stands in the background wearing their bright red shirts. He says this is his favorite picture because it captures the exact moment when we realized we were going to be okay, no matter what his family did. 3 days after the album arrives, Poppy sends an email with the subject line, "Documentation for your records." She explains that several wedding vendors witnessed the family drama and asked if we needed written statements about what they saw. She collected statements from the florist who overheard Rita's garden confrontation, the caterer who saw the family's initial arrival in all white, and 2 servers who heard guests commenting on the shirt situation throughout the reception. Poppy writes that she's documenting everything in case we ever need third-party proof of what happened, because she's seen families try to rewrite history or claim the couple overreacted to innocent mistakes. We thank her by email and save the statements in a folder labeled Wedding Documentation that I file in our home office. I hope we never need these papers, but having them feels like insurance against future gaslighting. If Rita ever tries to tell people we forced her family to wear ridiculous shirts for no reason, we have witnesses who can describe exactly what led to that moment. Brian reads through the statements carefully and points out that the florist's account mentions Rita laughing with Sophia while coordinating the white clothing in the garden before we confronted them, which proves they knew exactly what they were doing. Having objective witnesses who saw everything makes me feel less crazy. Like our version of events isn't just our perception, but documented reality. 2 months pass before we feel ready to celebrate our marriage in a way that feels joyful instead of tense. We decide to host a casual open house at our home on a Saturday afternoon, inviting my family and close friends, but deliberately leaving Brian's family off the guest list. I spend the morning cleaning and setting out food while Brian arranges chairs in the backyard, and we both feel lighter than we did planning the wedding because this party is just for people who genuinely support us. My parents arrive first and help with final preparations, and then friends start showing up with bottles of wine and congratulations cards. Julia brings her sister who helped us get the red shirts, and they both hug me tight while saying they're proud of how we handled everything. The party fills with easy conversation and laughter, people moving between the kitchen and backyard without any undercurrent of hostility or judgment. My mom's friends ask about our honeymoon plans and coo over wedding photos without making any comments about the shirts or family drama. Brian's veterinary colleagues who came talk about cases and conference plans, treating us like normal newlyweds instead of people who survived a family war. Standing in my own kitchen surrounded by people who actually like me, I realize how much energy we'd been spending trying to manage hostile relationships. The contrast between this relaxed gathering and our wedding day makes the dysfunction of Brian's family even more obvious, and I feel grateful we're not forcing ourselves to include them in every celebration just because they're related by blood. Near the end of the open house, around 4 in the afternoon when most guests have left, the doorbell rings. I open it to find Richard standing on our porch holding a wrapped package, and my first instinct is to close the door because we didn't invite him, and I don't want drama at our party. But he speaks quickly before I can react, saying he won't stay long but he wanted to drop something off for Brian. I let him in cautiously and call Brian from the backyard, watching Richard's face as he takes in the party aftermath and the few remaining guests. Brian comes inside and Richard hands him the package, explaining that he found a vintage restoration manual for the exact car model Brian mentioned wanting to work on months ago. Brian unwraps it carefully, and I can see genuine surprise on his face because this is actually thoughtful, not manipulative or controlling. Richard stays for exactly 20 minutes, making polite conversation with my parents about their recent vacation and asking Brian about a difficult equine surgery case without once mentioning the wedding or family drama. He compliments our home and thanks us for letting him stop by, then leaves without creating any tension or trying to extend his visit. After he drives away, Brian and I stand in the doorway looking at each other in confusion, because that was the most normal interaction we've ever had with his father. My dad says quietly that Richard seemed genuine, like he was trying to show respect through actions instead of words. This small demonstration of changed behavior means more than any apology email could have, because it shows Richard might actually be capable of following our boundaries and treating me like a person instead of an obstacle. Rita's absence from the open house is obvious but not surprising, and we don't hear anything from her directly about the party. But that evening, Sophia posts a vague subtweet that says, "Interesting how some people exclude their own blood from celebrations, but expect family to show up when it's convenient." The post doesn't name us, but it's clearly directed at our open house, and I feel a flash of anger before remembering that responding would just feed into her attention-seeking. We don't comment or like or acknowledge the post at all, letting it sit there without any reaction from us. Brian's cousin texts him privately to say she's glad we're not letting Rita's drama control every family interaction, and that several relatives who came to the open house felt the same way. Two of Brian's aunts send thank you notes for including them in the celebration, and both mention appreciating the chance to see us in a relaxed setting without tension. The quiet support from these family members feels more valuable than public arguments with Sophia, because it shows that not everyone in Brian's family agrees with Rita's campaign against me. Silence turns out to be more powerful than engaging with Sophia's provocations, and watching her post get minimal likes, and no supportive comments suggests even her friends are tired of the family drama narrative. The following week, we have a scheduled session with Miriam, where she suggests facilitating a phone call with Richard to establish specific holiday boundaries. She dials his number on speaker and explains that we're going to discuss logistics for upcoming holidays without getting into emotional territory or rehashing past conflicts. Richard agrees to the structured approach, and Miriam guides the conversation with specific questions about dates and expectations. We tell Richard we'll attend Thanksgiving at his house if Rita agrees to basic civility, which means no passive-aggressive comments, no surprise guests like Victoria, and no social media posts about the gathering. Richard says he'll talk to Rita about these terms and get back to us within a week. For Christmas, we explain that we're hosting at our home and he's welcome to come. But Rita needs to decide separately whether she can handle being in our space and following our rules. The conversation stays businesslike and focused on logistics, rather than feelings, and having Miriam mediate keeps everyone from sliding into accusations or defensiveness. Richard asks reasonable questions about timing and whether other family members will be at Christmas, and we answer honestly without trying to control who else he invites to Thanksgiving. By the end of the call, we have a tentative plan for both holidays with clear expectations, and Richard sounds more cooperative than he's been in months. Miriam points out after we hang up that Richard's willingness to accept our terms shows he's prioritizing relationship repair over his wife's grudges, which is a significant shift in family dynamics. 2 days after the therapy call, Rita sends an email directly to Brian with the subject line, holiday discussion. She writes that she'd like to have a phone conversation with just him to discuss the Thanksgiving and Christmas arrangements, because she has concerns about the terms Richard agreed to. Brian forwards the email to Miriam before responding, and Miriam replies firmly that any conversation about our marriage or boundaries needs to include me. She explains that allowing Rita to isolate Brian from my presence would undermine the unified front we've been building, and that Rita's request suggests she wants to manipulate him without me there to counter her narrative. Miriam drafts a response for Brian that politely declines the one-on-one call and offers to schedule another mediated session with all three of us present. Rita responds within an hour saying she'll pass on the mediated session, and her quick rejection confirms what we suspected about her motives. She wasn't trying to have a genuine discussion about holiday logistics. She was trying to get Brian alone, so she could pressure him into loosening boundaries without me involved. This failed attempt at manipulation actually makes us more confident in our boundary system, because it proves that including me in all family discussions isn't paranoid or controlling, but necessary protection against Rita's tactics. Brian tells me he feels relieved rather than guilty about refusing the call, because he can see clearly now how his mother tries to triangulate and divide us. Over the next few weeks, work life gradually returns to normal as the wedding drama fades from immediate gossip to old news. My veterinary clients stop making vague references to excitement at your wedding and go back to just asking about their pet's health. The receptionist stops giving me sympathetic looks when I arrive each morning, and my vet tech stops asking if I'm okay in that concerned tone that made me feel fragile. Brian says his colleagues at the equine practice have moved on to other topics too, no longer bringing up family drama or asking careful questions about how we're doing. We both appreciate that our professional reputations stayed intact throughout the conflict, probably because we handled everything with relative dignity and didn't let family problems affect our work quality. The local veterinary community seems to respect that we dealt with personal drama privately instead of making it public spectacle or letting it interfere with patient care. A colleague mentions casually that she heard we handled some family stuff at our wedding, but clearly dealt with it well, and her matter-of-fact tone suggests the story that circulated portrayed us as competent problem solvers rather than victims or drama creators. Going back to normal work routines feels grounding after months of wedding stress and family conflict, reminding us that we have professional identities and accomplishments beyond the dysfunction of Brian's family relationships. We spend an evening going through the wedding album again and selecting specific prints to send to family members who attended. I write a brief note on nice cardstock thanking them for celebrating with us and stating clearly that this album represents the official record of our wedding day. The note says there won't be any retakes or do-over photos or alternative versions, and we hope they'll treasure these images as much as we do. The phrasing is polite but firm, establishing that we're not open to Rita's earlier suggestion about redoing photos without the red shirts. We mail prints to Brian's grandmother, his aunts and uncles, and several cousins who showed genuine warmth at the wedding or the open house. My family gets prints too, along with digital copies they can share. Over the next 2 weeks, responses trickle in by mail and email. Brian's grandmother sends a handwritten thank you note saying the photos captured a memorable day, and she's proud of how we handled a difficult situation. 3 cousins send appreciative texts saying they love the photos and thanking us for including them. My parents frame their favorite shot and send a photo of it hanging in their living room. Rita and Sophia don't acknowledge receiving their prints at all, which doesn't surprise us but does confirm they're still holding on to their grievances. The contrast between relatives who respond with genuine appreciation and those who stay silent tells us exactly who we can count on for future relationship building. A week after sending the photos, Victoria emails Brian with a short message saying she understands he's moved on with his life, and she wishes both of us well. The email is only 3 sentences and sounds more resigned than bitter, like she's finally accepting that Brian isn't going to leave me for her. She writes that she won't be calling or texting anymore because she respects that he's married now, and she hopes we'll be happy together. Brian shows me the email and we both stare at it, trying to figure out if this is genuine or another manipulation, but her tone seems sincere enough. The calls and texts stop completely after that email. No more twice-weekly check-ins or attempts to maintain their friendship. That was really just her waiting for him to be available. Brian blocks her number anyway as a preventive measure, explaining that even if she means well now, he doesn't want any future attempts at contact or triangulation if she changes her mind. Blocking her feels like closing a door that should have been closed years ago, and we both feel relieved that this particular complication resolved itself without requiring direct confrontation. One less source of family drama means one less thing we have to actively manage, and Victoria's withdrawal removes Rita's favorite weapon for suggesting Brian made the wrong choice. 3 months slide by with work consuming most of our energy, and the family drama settling into background noise rather than constant crisis. I'm in the middle of a complicated surgery on a Labrador with intestinal blockage when my phone buzzes with an email notification, and I don't check it until 2 hours later when I'm scrubbing out. The sender name makes me pause. Richard Tanner, with a subject line that just says, overdue honesty. I forward it to Brian before reading and wait until we're both home that evening to open it together. Richard's email is longer than any previous communication, and the first paragraph immediately feels different because he names specific things he did wrong, instead of making vague statements about misunderstandings. He lists the critical emails he sent before our engagement suggesting we were rushing into marriage, the group text where he agreed with Rita's assessment that I wasn't their kind of people, and his participation in family discussions about how to discourage the relationship. He writes that he knew about Rita's white clothing plan 2 weeks before the wedding, because Sophia mentioned it during a phone call, and instead of shutting it down, he stayed silent, which he now recognizes made him complicit in the sabotage. The voicemails he left after the wedding, trying to control how we explained the shirt situation to extended family, were attempts to protect Rita's reputation, rather than acknowledge the harm she caused us, and he admits that prioritizing her image over our feelings was wrong. What surprises me most is that he doesn't blame Rita for any of it, or try to position himself as her victim. He takes full responsibility for his own choices, and acknowledges that staying silent when you witness bad behavior is its own form of participation. The email proposes switching to email-only communication for the next few months, so we can rebuild trust through consistent, documented behavior, rather than phone calls where emotions run high and details get fuzzy in memory. He says he understands that repair takes time, and he's willing to move at whatever pace we need, and if we decide we don't want a relationship with him at all, he'll respect that decision. Brian reads the email 3 times before speaking, and when he finally looks at me, his expression is cautiously hopeful, in a way I haven't seen directed at his family before. We sit at the kitchen table drafting our response together, agreeing that we'll accept the email-only boundary and that we appreciate his specific acknowledgments, but we're not ready to commit to holiday gatherings or regular contact yet. Our reply is brief and measured, thanking him for the honesty and saying we'll see how the next few months go before making decisions about future interactions. 2 weeks after Richard's email, Brian gets a phone call from his cousin Noah, who rarely contacts us except for major family events. Noah tells Brian that their Aunt Laura cornered Sophia at a country club charity event and had what he describes as a very direct conversation about the wedding situation. Laura apparently told Sophia that the white clothing stunt made the entire family look petty and vindictive to everyone who attended, and that people at the club have been asking Laura pointed questions about what kind of family coordinates that level of sabotage against one of their own. Noah says Laura specifically told Sophia that her generation's social media mockery made things worse because it proved the family's hostility wasn't just Rita's doing, but a coordinated campaign, and that Sophia's friends have been commenting privately about how immature the whole thing looked. We don't know exactly what else was said during that conversation because Noah only heard about it secondhand, but the timing lines up with something we noticed a few days earlier. Sophia's Instagram, which had been posting regular subtle digs about family members who can't take a joke, and some people being too sensitive, goes completely quiet about anything related to us or the wedding. Her last post about family drama was a week before Laura's conversation, and since then her feed returns to the usual charity event photos and vacation pictures, with 0 references to Brian or our marriage. I check her Twitter and Facebook too, and the pattern holds across all platforms. Brian and I discuss whether this represents genuine change, or just Sophia learning to be more careful about public criticism, and we agree it's probably the latter, but either way the result is the same. The social media campaign that was feeding Rita's narrative and making family gatherings more hostile has stopped, and while Sophia might still complain in private group chats, at least she's not broadcasting her contempt to hundreds of followers anymore. The fact that it took Laura's intervention rather than anything we said directly bothers me a little, because it suggests Sophia only responds to pressure from within her own social circle, but I also recognize that sometimes change happens through unexpected channels, and I should accept the improvement rather than critique the method. As November approaches, Brian and I face the question of where to spend Thanksgiving, and quickly realize we're both dreading the idea of navigating his family's gathering. Rita sent a formal email invitation to their house with a note saying she hopes we can move past recent unpleasantness and focus on family traditions, which completely ignores that the unpleasantness was her deliberate sabotage rather than a mutual misunderstanding. Richard sent a separate email saying he'd understand if we chose not to come and wouldn't pressure us either way, which feels more respectful but doesn't solve the problem of whether attending would be healthy for us. We spend an evening talking through our options and realize that what we actually want is a quiet day at our own house without managing anyone's emotions or navigating complicated family dynamics. I call my mother and ask if she'd be willing to come to us instead of hosting her usual big family dinner, and she agrees immediately, saying she'd much rather have a relaxed meal with just the three of us. Brian emails his father to decline the invitation, explaining that we're starting our own tradition this year, and we hope they understand. And Richard replies with a brief message saying he respects our choice. The morning of Thanksgiving, my mom arrives with her famous pumpkin pie and a bottle of wine, and the three of us cook together in our kitchen while playing old music and telling stories that have nothing to do with wedding drama or family conflict. We eat at our dining room table with mismatched dishes and no formal place settings, and the conversation flows easily through topics like my mom's garden plans and Brian's new equine surgery techniques, and whether we should adopt a second dog. Nobody criticizes the food or suggests we should have done things differently, and when my mom leaves that evening with hugs and genuine warmth, Brian and I clean up the kitchen together in comfortable silence. The day felt peaceful rather than isolating, and I realized that building our own traditions instead of trying to fit into existing ones that don't have space for us might be the healthiest choice we've made all year. 4 months after our wedding, I'm sitting in my clinic office between appointments when I find myself thinking about how our life has settled into something that feels sustainable rather than constantly crisis-driven. Brian's family exists at arm's length with clear rules that most of them follow most of the time, which isn't warm, but it's workable. Richard sends occasional emails that stick to neutral topics and respect our boundaries, and while I don't fully trust him yet, I can see he's making genuine efforts to rebuild, rather than just waiting for us to forget what happened. Rita maintains chilly distance through brief responses to logistical emails and declining our invitations to casual dinners. But she's stopped actively sabotaging us or recruiting others to her cause, which feels like progress even if it's not reconciliation. Sophia's social media has stayed quiet about us for 2 months now, and while I assume she still complains in private, the public campaign has ended, and that removes a significant source of stress. Brian and I have learned to set boundaries without losing ourselves in guilt or anger, and our marriage feels stronger because we faced this crisis together and proved we could protect our relationship without destroying ourselves in the process. The relationships with his family aren't warm and probably never will be, but they're honest and they're ours to define, rather than being dictated by Rita's expectations or country club social politics. Some of Brian's relatives have shown genuine warmth, and those are the relationships we're investing in, while others remain distant, and we're learning to be okay with that. Victoria stopped calling months ago, and that particular source of triangulation has resolved itself without requiring ongoing management. Our wedding photos sit on our mantle showing everyone in red Survivor shirts, and instead of feeling embarrassed by them, I feel proud because they represent us refusing to be victims of someone else's sabotage. This isn't a fairy tale ending where everyone learns their lesson, and the family becomes close and loving, but it's a realistic victory where we've established respect as the minimum requirement for relationship, and we're willing to accept distance from people who can't meet that standard. Our life together is building around work we love and friends who support us, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing we can handle hard things without compromising who we are, and that feels like enough.